Hello, my dear masterminds. Something happened when you walked into that room, something that nobody could quite name, something that registered beyond conscious analysis and went straight to the intuitive level, before anyone consciously recognized you, before anyone had time to form thoughts or opinions, before words could even begin to describe what was happening. They sensed it, a shift, a change. A disruption in the ordinary flow of energy that had existed moments before you arrived. You might not have noticed it yourself. You weren't trying to make an entrance, weren't performing or posturing or attempting to draw attention naturally. You simply walked in, existed, stood there. But your presence, the frequency you carry now, it doesn't need announcement. It doesn't require effort. It simply is. And that is that pure existence at your current frequency. It changed everything in that space before a single word was spoken. They sensed it internally first. A subtle tension, an inexplicable awareness, a knowing that something was different, even though nothing obvious had changed. Their awareness picked up on your presence before their minds could process what they were detecting. And in that gap between feeling and understanding, everything shifted. People still operate on deep instinctive patterns beneath social conditioning, still responding to subtle signals of significance and presence long before conscious thought engages. And what they detected in you was something many people spend their entire lives never developing. When you entered that room, every awareness in the space registered something. Not contrast exactly, but significance, weight, a frequency that invited recognition even from people who weren't consciously paying attention. It started with the people closest to the door. A momentary pause in their conversation, a slight shift in their posture, a glance that lingered half a second longer than necessary. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but the signal was sent. Someone different just arrived. Someone operating at a different frequency. Someone who alters the dynamic just by being present. Then it rippled outward, person by person, conversation by conversation, the energy in the room recalibrating itself around this new presence. Some people felt a pull, a natural curiosity about who you were and what you carried. Others felt a push, an intuitive recognition that you operated at a level that made them aware of their own boundaries. But everyone felt something. Nobody could explain it if you asked them. They didn't have words for it yet, didn't have conscious understanding of what their awareness was registering. But the feeling was undeniable. Think about it like this. You've walked into rooms 1,000 times in your life, but this time was different. The barista who usually ignores customers looked up. The group deep in conversation paused mid-sentence. The person on their phone glanced over, not because you did anything, because of the presence you carried. Let's talk about what they actually felt in those first moments. Because it wasn't vague, it was specific, real. Even if they couldn't articulate it, some felt their attention pulled, like a natural pull, drawing their awareness toward you even when they were trying to focus elsewhere. Their conversations continued, but part of their awareness was noticing you, paying attention, trying to make sense of why you drew so much unconscious attention. Others felt a sense of internal tension. In their posture, in their presence, a subtle defensiveness, activating without them choosing it. Not fear exactly, but a recognition that they were in the presence of something that challenged their sense of place or certainty. Their egos sensed comparison, sensed influence, and automatically began preparing responses they hadn't consciously decided to make. Some felt fascination, an inexplicable interest in observing you, not because you were doing anything particularly interesting, but because your energy was doing something their frequency couldn't quite decode. You were operating at a bandwidth they couldn't fully access. And that mystery, that gap between what they could sense and what they could understand, created a strong draw on their attention. And here's what most of them didn't realize. They were experiencing something their awareness recognized as rare, as valuable, as something that drew their interest. And a few, the rare ones with enough awareness to recognize what they were detecting, felt respect, immediate, intuitive respect for someone who carries themselves with that level of presence, who exists with that degree of certainty, who operates from that depth of center. They couldn't explain why they respected you, they just did, the same way you naturally recognize strength in nature. It doesn't need to prove itself, it simply exists. But it wasn't just the people who sensed it. The room itself changed. The energy, the atmosphere, the invisible field that exists in any space where humans gather. Before you arrived, that field had a certain quality. Conversations happening at certain volumes, laughter reaching certain pitches, tension existing at certain levels. The space had found its equilibrium, and then you walked in, and the equilibrium shifted, not shattered. Shifted. The conversations didn't stop, but they changed texture. The laughter continued, but it modified its frequency. The tension that existed before reorganized itself around this new variable. The room's energy recalibrated, restructured, rearranged itself around the presence that just entered, your frequency. When it's this strong, this coherent, this centered, it has noticeable impact on everything around it. You didn't say much when you first entered. Maybe a greeting, maybe nothing at all, but your silence, the quality of your presence in that silence, it spoke volumes. It said things that words never could. It communicated in frequencies that bypass language entirely and land directly in awareness, where truth is recognized before it's understood. And here's the psychological principle they were experiencing. Silence from uncertain people feels awkward. Silence from grounded people feels intentional. Your silence didn't need filling. It held space. Your silence said, I don't need to fill space with noise to justify my existence. Your stillness said, I don't need to perform to validate my presence. Your calm said, I don't need your approval to feel comfortable in this space. All of that transmitted without a single word, received by everyone in the room, whether they were consciously aware of it or not. Real silence. The kind that comes from genuine presence rather than uncomfortable awkwardness. It's influential. It creates space. It draws attention. It invites people to become aware of their own noise. Your silence contrasted with their noise. Your stillness contrasted with their movement. Your centered presence contrasted with their scattered energy. And in that contrast, they sensed the difference. Hours later, some of them were still thinking about it, still trying to make sense of what they felt, replaying the moment in their minds, trying to understand why your presence had such impact when you didn't do anything obviously impressive. They'd talk to others who were there. Did you feel that when they walked in? There was something about them, right? I can't explain it, but... And what they were struggling to articulate was something you've spent years developing, something many people never cultivate, something that can't be faked or performed or manufactured. Your presence operated at a level that exists before language, before concepts, before the part of awareness that can name and categorize and explain. Some would try to rationalize it away, tell themselves they were imagining things, that you were just another person, that their reaction was an overreaction. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It lingered, persistent, undeniable, because what they felt wasn't imagination. It was recognition, their awareness, recognizing something their intellect hadn't caught up to yet. Days later, some would finally start to understand, start to piece together what their awareness detected immediately. Oh, that person operates at a different frequency, carries themselves with a different kind of certainty, exists with a different quality of presence. The understanding came slowly, but the feeling came instantly. Let's be clear about what you weren't doing. You weren't trying to make an impression, weren't attempting to control the room, weren't performing authority or projecting superiority. You weren't walking in with a preset intention to change the energy or shift the dynamic or make people feel any particular way. You were simply existing, being present in your authentic frequency without modification. This is crucial to understand, because the strength in your presence isn't about effort, isn't about technique, isn't about strategy or deliberate effort or conscious projection of energy. It's about authenticity, about being so completely yourself, so fully aligned with your core frequency, so thoroughly integrated in your own presence, that you naturally affect spaces just by occupying them. Here's what separates you from those who try to have presence. They're performing confidence. You're grounded in it. They're projecting certainty. You're living it. When you're performing, people sense the performance. When you're trying, people sense the effort. When you're projecting, people sense the projection. All of that creates a certain kind of impact. But it's not the same. It's not as deep, not as real, not as lasting. What they sensed from you was essence, pure, unfiltered, authentic presence, the frequency of someone who's done the internal work, who's integrated their center, who's claimed their center. Something changed in you, not recently. This has been building, developing, integrating over time through everything you've experienced, processed, transformed. Every challenge you faced and didn't run from. Every internal challenge you faced and worked through. Every limitation you encountered and chose to move beyond. Think about the version of you from 5 years ago, walking into that same room. Different reaction, different energy, different impact. Not because the room changed, because you did. This frequency, it's not something you put on, not something you activate for special occasions. It's who you are, your baseline, your default state. You've become someone who naturally operates at a level that many people only access in peak moments. You've made extraordinary your ordinary, made strength your normal, made centered your consistent. And frequency doesn't mislead, can't be faked, can't be manufactured through techniques or tricks or tactics. It's the sum total of who you've become. The energy signature of your awareness, the vibration of your being, and when that frequency is as coherent, as integrated, as steady as yours has become. It affects everything and everyone in proximity to it. People operating from different states either rise to meet yours or move away from it. Spaces with chaotic energy either organize around yours or remain unsettled. Not everyone in that room felt positive about your presence. Some felt distinctly uncomfortable, unsettled, like your existence in the space created dissonance with how they were operating. And this wasn't because you did anything to them. Here's the psychological reality. Frequencies that are coherent expose incoherence. Presence that is authentic reveals performance. Authenticity highlights contrast. You became a mirror without trying to be one. Your centered presence reflected their scattered energy. Your authentic existence highlighted their performance. Your comfortable silence exposed their uncomfortable noise. None of this was your intention, but it was the natural effect of operating at your frequency in proximity to those operating at different ones. Some people, when they come across someone operating at a more integrated frequency, feel inspired, motivated, curious. They sense possibility. They recognize potential. They feel pulled toward growth. But others feel unsettled, aware, uncertain. They sense judgment even when none exists. They feel compared even when no comparison is being made. Their discomfort wasn't about you, it was about them. About the gap between where they are and where some part of them knows they could be. But others were drawn to you. Naturally, they found themselves wanting to be near you, to talk to you, to understand what you carry that creates such presence. They couldn't explain the attraction, couldn't articulate why they felt drawn toward you, but the pull was real, undeniable, operating below the level of conscious choice. This effect, it's not about charisma in the traditional sense. Not about being charming or entertaining or particularly likable. It's about carrying a frequency that other frequencies recognize as valuable, as rare, as something they want proximity to. Because clarity often encourages alignment. Your presence called to something in them, something that wanted to wake up, to remember, to become more of what it actually is. So they found reasons to be near you, to engage with you, to create connection, not because they consciously understood why, but because their instinct knew. And here's what they were unconsciously recognizing. Being near your frequency would influence their perspective. Your coherence would bring clarity to confusion. Your centeredness would remind them of their own potential center. Let's talk about what it actually means to change a room with your presence. It's not about directing, not about controlling, not about making the space revolve around you. It's about introducing a frequency so different from the existing frequency that the entire space has to reorganize itself, has to find a new equilibrium that accounts for this new element. Before you arrived, the room had a certain balance. Certain people held certain positions in the social dynamic. Certain energy patterns flowed in certain directions. The space had organized itself around the frequencies present. You introduced a new frequency, and the entire structure had to reorganize. Not because you demanded it, because frequency is magnetic. Strong coherence influences scattered coherence. The room after you entered wasn't the same room, same people, same physical space, but different energy, different dynamic, different possibilities. You didn't change the room by doing anything to it. You changed it by being something in it, by introducing a frequency that required adjustment, by existing at a level that invited realignment. There were a few people in that room who didn't need days to understand what they felt, who recognized immediately what they were in the presence of. These were the ones with developed perception, with conscious awareness of energy and frequency, with enough inner work done that they could recognize it in others instantly. They saw you, really saw you. Not just your appearance, but your presence. What you carry, what you embody, what you represent. They recognized the journey you must have taken to arrive at this frequency, the work you must have done to develop this presence, the transformation you must have undergone to exist with this quality of being. And they felt respect, deep respect, the kind that comes from recognizing in someone else what you've worked to develop in yourself. These people, they're your real audience, because these are the ones who can actually receive what you carry. Long after you left that room, your presence remained, not physically, of course, but energetically. The space had been changed. The people had been affected. The frequency had been shifted, and none of it went back to exactly how it was before you arrived. Because grounded presence leaves an impression, creates lasting effects, changes things in ways that persist beyond physical proximity. Some people carried your presence with them when they left, not consciously, but they'd been influenced by it. The most powerful part of all this is that you weren't trying, weren't conscious of the effect you were having, weren't working to change the room or impact the people or create any particular response. You were just being yourself, existing in your authentic frequency, present in your genuine strength, operating from your integrated center. This is the ultimate strength. The kind that works without effort, that influences without intention, that affects without trying. Because it's not strength projected, it's presence embodied. Not energy sent out, but presence expressed. Here's the truth about presence that most people never understand. It's not something you do, it's something you are, not something you project. Something you embody, real presence, the kind that changes rooms and affects people and creates lasting impact. It comes from one source, being completely, authentically, unapologetically yourself. You've stopped pretending, stopped performing, stopped modifying yourself to fit expectations or meet standards or make others comfortable. You've claimed your authentic frequency, owned your genuine presence, embraced your real self. They sensed it before they understood it, because awareness often precedes understanding, always has, always will. Awareness registers before explanation forms. Your presence reached their deepest levels before surface thought could begin to comprehend what was being communicated. So yes, focused individual. They sensed it before they understood it. Your presence changed the room, not because you tried to change it, because you exist at a frequency that changes things just by being present. Keep being this. Keep existing at this level. Keep operating from this frequency, because the world needs presence like yours, needs people who've done the work, needs beings who carry genuine presence. They sensed it before they understood it, and they'll keep sensing it, keep being influenced by it, whether they ever fully understand or not, because presence like yours doesn't need explanation. It just needs to exist. And in existing, it reshapes everything around it. A person can fake happiness for a very long time. long enough to laugh with people, while secretly feeling emotionally dead inside. That kind of pain is strange, because nobody sees it. You still function, still talk, still smile, but internally, you are exhausted from carrying disappointment. Disappointment from people, from memories, from constantly giving your heart to hands that did not deserve it. And eventually, something terrifying happens. You stop expecting goodness from anyone. Not because you hate humanity, because experience taught you caution. You begin analyzing every word, every promise, every smile. Not out of paranoia, out of survival. Because the same heart that once loved deeply was also the same heart abandoned repeatedly. Do you know what hurts the most? Realizing you were slowly disappearing while trying to save everyone else. You kept understanding people, forgiving people, defending people, while nobody noticed your soul collapsing quietly in the background. That changes a man, not physically, spiritually. He becomes quieter, harder to reach, harder to hurt. Not because he lost emotions, because emotions became dangerous for him. And people will say, you changed. No. Pain changed the way you survive. After that, life starts feeling different. Not darker, not brighter, just emptier. You walk through crowds and suddenly realize you no longer feel connected to anyone. That is the frightening part. Not sadness, not anger. Detachment. People think becoming emotionally numb makes you strong. Oh yes, very poetic, very mysterious, very cold Sigma male. But they do not understand what it actually costs. It costs warmth. It costs innocence. It costs the ability to trust somebody without analyzing every tiny change in their voice. Because once betrayal enters the nervous system enough times, your body starts treating affection like danger. And suddenly, you become the person who stays quiet, the person who disappears for hours, days, sometimes weeks, not to manipulate anyone, just to breathe without pressure. Because deep down, you became tired of performing happiness for people who never cared about your suffering. Funny world. They ignore your pain when you speak softly, but panic the moment you stop speaking at all. You know what really destroys a human being? Holding everything in. Every humiliation, every fake apology, every moment you needed help but heard silence instead. That pressure stays inside the chest, inside the throat, inside the mind. And one day, the soul cannot carry it anymore. So the personality changes, not because the person wanted darkness. Darkness adapted to them first. You stop arguing, stop defending yourself, stop asking people to understand your intentions, because you finally realize people usually understand. They just do not care enough to act differently. That realization. That realization kills something inside a person forever. After that, you become quieter around everyone, more observant, more distant, not cruel, not heartless, just careful. Because the version of you that loved too deeply did not survive this world. And nobody notices the funeral. That is the strange thing about emotional death. There are no ambulances, no crowds, no prayers. A person just keeps walking while something beautiful inside them slowly disappears. Sometimes it happens during a random night. You sit alone, staring at the ceiling, too mentally exhausted to even cry anymore. And suddenly, you realize nobody truly knows how much pain you survived silently. Not even the people closest to you. Because you mastered the dangerous art of hiding suffering behind normal conversations. Yeah, I'm good. Just tired. Everything's fine. Meanwhile, your mind is collapsing in complete silence. That is what prolonged disappointment does to a soul. It teaches you emotional isolation. You stop reaching out, stop expecting comfort, stop believing anyone will stay long enough to understand you deeply. And honestly, part of you becomes addicted to solitude. Not because loneliness feels good, because it feels safer than attachment, safer than hoping, safer than trusting words. The terrifying part is, people usually notice your coldness before they notice what caused it. They judge the reaction, but ignore the damage. They remember the moment you changed, but forget the 1,000 moments that forced you to. And after enough pain, your heart begins operating differently. You stop getting excited too quickly. Stop believing promises too easily. Stop attaching your peace to human behavior. Because experience whispered something cruel into your spirit. Care less or suffer more. So you adapt, quietly, painfully. You become harder to impress, harder to manipulate, harder to emotionally control. Not because you became powerful, because you became tired. Tired of giving loyalty to temporary people. Tired of draining yourself trying to save connections already dying. Tired of being emotionally available in a world that rewards emotional emptiness. And eventually, you stop searching for people who understand you. You just pray for peace inside your own mind. Sometimes, the most damaged people are not the loud ones. Not the screaming ones, not the violent ones. It is the quiet person, sitting there with a calm face, while fighting chaos inside their own head. You can almost hear the exhaustion in their breathing, because carrying emotional pain for years changes the nervous system. It changes the eyes, the reactions. Even the silence feels heavier. And eventually, they stop trying to explain themselves. Not because they have nothing to say, because they are tired of speaking to people who only understand pain after it becomes visible. That is why some humans suddenly disappear emotionally. One day they are warm, present, loyal. Then slowly, they become distant, quiet, unreadable. Not out of arrogance, out of survival. Because every time they opened their heart, someone treated it carelessly. Funny, people always say communication is important, but nobody talks about how exhausting communication becomes when you are constantly misunderstood. So the soul adapts differently. It becomes observant instead of expressive, cold instead of hopeful, controlled instead of emotional. And the terrifying part? After enough suffering, peace starts feeling unfamiliar. You become so used to emotional pain that calmness almost feels suspicious. That is how deeply hurt people think. Always scanning, always analyzing, always preparing for disappointment, even while smiling. Because deep down, they remember every moment they were abandoned while struggling silently. Every ignored message, every fake promise, every moment they begged internally for someone to simply care. But nobody came. So they learned something dangerous. Never depend emotionally on people who benefit from your weakness. That lesson changes a person permanently. After that, they stop chasing love, stop chasing validation, stop chasing understanding. And instead, they begin protecting whatever remains of their peace. Because once a heart breaks too many times, it no longer fears loneliness, it fears attachment. And that fear, most people will never understand it correctly. They think you became distant because you are arrogant, cold, emotionless. No. You simply learned what emotional pain does to a human mind when it repeats too many times. A strange thing happens after enough disappointment. The body continues living, but the spirit becomes cautious of everything. You start hesitating before opening messages, before answering calls, before trusting smiles. Not because you hate people, because experience taught you that attachment can become a weapon, especially when your heart is soft. Soft people suffer differently. They remember tones, energy shifts, tiny changes in behavior. They replay conversations inside their head for hours, wondering where everything started falling apart. And while everyone else moves on casually, they stay awake fighting memories. That is why emotionally exhausted people become quiet. Not because they have nothing inside them, because there is too much inside them. Too many thoughts, too many disappointments, too many wounds hidden behind controlled expressions. You know what truly breaks someone? Realizing they gave genuine love to people who only loved convenience. That realization feels like poison entering the chest slowly, because suddenly every memory changes meaning. Every smile looks suspicious. Every promise sounds artificial. And the mind starts asking dangerous questions. Was any of it real? Did they ever truly care? Or was I only useful? Those questions can destroy a person internally, especially the loyal ones, the ones who stayed too long, the ones who kept forgiving while secretly bleeding emotionally. Because loyal people rarely break immediately. No, they endure, and endure, and endure, until eventually their soul collapses all at once. And when that collapse happens, they stop becoming emotionally available. Not out of revenge, not to manipulate anyone, but because survival finally becomes more important than attachment. Funny, isn't it? People will ignore your suffering for years, then complain the moment your personality changes, as if pain is supposed to leave a person untouched, as if betrayal does not rewire the mind. But it does. Pain teaches silence. Pain teaches emotional control. Pain teaches people how to hide sadness behind eye contact and short answers. And after enough heartbreak, a person stops looking for happiness in others completely. They begin searching for something much more important. Peace. Real peace. The kind that does not disappear depending on who stays or leaves. Because deep inside, they finally understood a brutal truth. Not everybody who smiles at you values your heart. Not everybody who says, "I'm here," will stay when life becomes heavy. And once you truly understand that, you never love the same way again. After that realization, you begin seeing the world differently. Not emotionally, psychologically. You start noticing how easily people abandon each other now. How quickly loyalty disappears when convenience ends. People call it protecting their peace. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is just selfishness wearing soft words. And the scary part? The truly damaged people can recognize emotional emptiness immediately. The fake empathy, the temporary affection, the forced concern. Because suffering sharpens observation. Pain turns sensitive people into analysts. You begin reading pauses, tone shifts, delayed replies, energy changes. Not because you are obsessive, because disappointment trained your instincts to survive emotionally. That is why some humans become emotionally distant without warning. Not because they stopped loving deeply, because they became terrified of what deep love costs. A soft heart experiences betrayal differently. It does not just hurt for a day, it echoes for weeks, months, sometimes years. Especially when the person genuinely cared. Especially when they stayed loyal while silently destroying themselves emotionally. And eventually, they stop expecting fairness from people altogether. Not in a bitter way, in a realistic way. They understand now, humans often protect themselves first, even if it destroys you. That truth creates emotional loneliness, because after seeing enough disappointment, you no longer relax around affection completely. Part of you always stays alert, always prepared for the moment someone changes. And honestly, that level of caution is exhausting. You begin missing the old version of yourself sometimes, the naive version, the warm version, the version that trusted people naturally without overanalyzing everything. But that version suffered too much, so your mind buried him. Not because he was weak, because he was too vulnerable for this world. You know what is heartbreaking? Watching yourself slowly become emotionally unavailable, while remembering you were once full of love. That contrast hurts. Especially late at night, when the noise disappears, when distractions stop working, when memories start returning one by one. The ignored efforts, the fake promises, the moments you were emotionally drowning while pretending to be okay so nobody would worry. Funny, people only notice your pain after your personality changes visibly, not during the silent suffering, not during the emotional exhaustion, not during the nights you were breaking mentally while still being kind to everyone. That kind of loneliness changes a human deeply. It creates emotional fatigue, state where the soul no longer wants drama or revenge or even explanations anymore. It just wants rest. Real rest. Not sleep, not distraction. Inner silence. Freedom from emotional chaos. Freedom from carrying everybody while nobody carries you. And after enough pain, people stop begging for love entirely. They start protecting their energy instead, protecting their time, their peace, their emotional stability. Because once someone experiences repeated emotional destruction, they understand something dangerous. Not every connection deserves access to your heart. That lesson is expensive. Very expensive. It costs innocence. It costs softness. Sometimes, it costs the entire version of you that once believed people would never intentionally hurt you. And after that dies, you still smile, still function, still continue life, but something inside you becomes permanently quieter. Not dead, not evil, just careful with love now. And being careful with love can feel lonely in ways words cannot explain. Because now, every emotion passes through caution first. Every attachment, every conversation, every moment of vulnerability. Your heart no longer opens naturally. It studies people first. The eyes, the tone, the consistency, especially the consistency. Because damaged people understand something others ignore. Words mean nothing without patterns. Anyone can sound caring temporarily. Anyone can say, "I'll stay." The real truth appears during difficult moments, during pressure, distance, misunderstandings, emotional exhaustion. That is where masks begin falling apart. And unfortunately, you learned that lesson through pain instead of wisdom. You learned it while emotionally overextending yourself for people who barely appreciated your presence, while sacrificing sleep, energy, mental stability. Funny thing about loyal people, they destroy themselves quietly. Not because they enjoy suffering, because they keep hoping their effort will eventually be valued. But sometimes, people become comfortable receiving love they never intended to return equally. That realization leaves scars, deep ones, especially when you remember how genuine your intentions were. You were not trying to manipulate anyone, not trying to control anyone. You simply cared deeply. And somehow, that became the reason you suffered the most. That is why emotionally exhausted people become colder with time. Not immediately, slowly. Like winter entering a house through tiny cracks. At first, you still try, still give chances, still explain your feelings calmly. But after enough disappointment, your energy changes. You stop fighting for attention, stop forcing communication, stop trying to convince people to value your existence. Because real care should not require begging. Do you know what truly hurts? Realizing you abandoned yourself trying to keep other people comfortable. You ignored your intuition, ignored exhaustion, ignored emotional pain, all because you feared losing people. And in the process, you slowly lost yourself instead. That kind of realization changes how a person loves forever. After that, they become more silent emotionally, more private, more protective of their inner world. Not because they became heartless, because they finally understood how dangerous emotional attachment can become when given to the wrong hands. Some people touch your life gently. Others leave psychological damage behind them. Damage that follows you into future conversations, future relationships, future moments of vulnerability. And suddenly, you are apologizing for things that were never your fault. Overthinking harmless messages, preparing emotionally for abandonment before anything even happens. That is what repeated disappointment does to the nervous system. It teaches fear disguised as caution. And eventually, you stop searching for people who complete you. Because you understand now, depending emotionally on unstable people can destroy your peace completely. So your priorities change. Protecting your mind becomes more important than attention. Peace becomes more attractive than excitement. Distance becomes safer than emotional chaos. It is strange. The same person who once begged for connection now disappears to recover alone. The same person who once over-explained every feeling now answers with silence. Not because they no longer care, because caring once almost destroyed them. And after surviving enough emotional darkness, a person starts craving simple things: quiet, stability, honesty. Someone whose presence does not feel emotionally dangerous. Because deep down, they are tired. Tired of surviving relationships instead of feeling safe inside them. And that exhaustion changes a soul permanently. Permanent changes are terrifying. Not because they happen suddenly. Because one day you wake up and realize you do not recognize yourself emotionally anymore. The old version of you used to speak with warmth, used to become excited easily, used to believe effort could save people. Now, you hesitate before showing emotion at all, because life taught you something painful. Not everybody values a sincere heart. Some people only value access to it. Access to your attention, your patience, your understanding. And the moment you stop giving endlessly, their energy changes completely. That realization can make a person emotionally numb for a very long time, especially someone who genuinely loved with pure intentions. Because pure people blame themselves first, always. What did I do wrong? Why was I not enough? Why do people leave after I give them everything? Those thoughts destroy people internally. And the saddest part, most of the time, your kindness was never the problem. You simply gave it to emotionally careless people. Emotionally careless people are dangerous. Not because they scream, not because they hate you openly, because they slowly drain the light out of you while pretending everything is normal. And by the time you notice, you are mentally exhausted, emotionally anxious, constantly overthinking. That kind of damage changes the way someone experiences love forever. Now every compliment feels suspicious. Every promise feels temporary. Every connection feels fragile. Not because you became negative, because disappointment repeated itself too many times. You know what emotionally tired people crave the most? Not attention, not popularity, not validation. Safety. Real emotional safety. A place where the nervous system can finally relax, where silence does not mean punishment, where affection does not disappear randomly, where loyalty is not treated like weakness. But after enough heartbreak, people stop believing that kind of peace exists for them. So they adapt instead. They become independent emotionally, detached, controlled. Not because they stopped feeling deeply, because feeling deeply once shattered them completely. And honestly, that is what most people never understand about emotionally damaged souls. They are not cold because they enjoy distance. They became cold trying to survive chaos. Chaos in relationships. Chaos in communication. Chaos inside their own thoughts. Especially the thoughts. A wounded mind never truly rests. It keeps replaying conversations, analyzing facial expressions, questioning intentions, trying to detect abandonment before it happens again. That level of emotional alertness is exhausting. It drains the soul slowly. And people still wonder why some good humans suddenly disappear emotionally. Because they reached their limit. Their spirit became tired of carrying emotional weight nobody noticed. Tired of understanding everyone, while nobody tried understanding them. Tired of being available, while secretly falling apart alone. And eventually, the heart changes priorities completely. Peace over attachment. Distance over drama. Silence over emotional confusion. Not because love disappeared, because survival became more important than love. That is the brutal truth. Some people do not become emotionless after pain. They simply stop giving people access to the softest parts of them, because those soft parts were once destroyed without mercy. And once someone experiences that deeply enough, they never return completely to who they were before. And maybe that is the part nobody prepares you for. Not the heartbreak itself, not the betrayal. The aftermath. The quiet, psychological aftermath that follows you into ordinary moments. You could be sitting in a peaceful room, hearing nothing, doing absolutely nothing wrong, and suddenly your chest feels heavy again, because memories return without permission. A sentence, a tone, a familiar silence. Tiny things can reopen emotional wounds people thought had already healed. But wounded hearts do not heal in straight lines. Some days you feel powerful. Other days, one memory destroys your entire emotional balance. That inconsistency exhausts people mentally, especially those who suffer silently. The quiet ones, the strong-looking ones, the people everyone assumes are fine. Funny world. The humans who smile the calmest, are sometimes fighting the darkest thoughts alone, thoughts nobody would even suspect. Thoughts about disappearing emotionally, cutting everyone off, stopping effort completely. Not because they hate people, because they are tired of feeling emotionally unsafe around them. There is a specific type of exhaustion that changes personalities permanently. Emotional exhaustion. The kind created by constant disappointment, constant pressure, constant pretending. Pretending you are okay. Pretending you are not hurt. Pretending you are not mentally drowning. That performance destroys people slowly, especially sensitive souls. Because sensitive people absorb everything deeply. The rejection, the disrespect, the emotional inconsistency. And eventually, their nervous system becomes overwhelmed. That is when detachment begins. Not as a choice, as protection. The heart finally says, I cannot survive this amount of pain anymore. So it closes, quietly, without warning. And after that, the person still laughs sometimes, still talks sometimes, still functions normally in public, but internally, something feels missing, something soft, something warm. Because repeated disappointment slowly removed their emotional innocence. Realizing you became emotionally strong through suffering instead of peace. Strong enough to hide pain during conversations. Strong enough to comfort others while secretly breaking. Strong enough to survive nights nobody knows about. But strength built through pain always carries sadness inside it. Always. That is why emotionally damaged people sometimes disappear for no reason. They are trying to recover energy mentally, trying to silence the noise inside their own head, trying to feel like themselves again, even if only for a moment. Because constantly carrying emotional tension changes the body too. The breathing becomes heavier, sleep becomes strange. The mind refuses to relax completely, always alert, always expecting disappointment. Always emotionally prepared for people to leave. And honestly, that expectation becomes its own kind of prison. You stop enjoying connections naturally, stop trusting peace fully, stop believing happiness will stay long enough to feel safe. So instead of relaxing, you observe, analyze, prepare emotionally. Even around people you love. That is what repeated emotional pain does. It turns survival into a permanent mindset. And eventually, you become someone who protects their peace at all costs. Not because you were selfish, because nobody was there protecting your heart when it was breaking quietly. Quiet suffering changes people in ways the outside world never notices. Because pain is strange. Sometimes it screams, sometimes it becomes silent enough to hide behind normal conversations. And those are usually the most dangerous wounds. The invisible ones. The wounds that make a person smile less naturally, trust less easily, disappear more often. Not because they hate humanity, because they no longer feel emotionally safe inside it. There is a heavy loneliness in realizing nobody truly saw how much you were carrying. Not friends, not family, not even the people you stayed loyal to the longest. Everybody noticed the personality change, but almost nobody noticed the suffering that caused it. That realization hardens the spirit. You stop expecting emotional rescue from anyone. Stop believing people will magically understand your silence. Because experience taught you something brutal. Most humans only understand visible pain. If you are bleeding physically, people panic. But emotional bleeding? They call it mood swings. Sensitive souls suffer deeply in this world. They notice everything. The delayed replies, the cold tone, the emotional distance hiding behind fake politeness. And while others move on casually, they sit alone, replaying moments inside their head for hours, trying to understand what changed, trying to understand why kindness keeps ending in disappointment. That mental exhaustion accumulates slowly, like pressure inside a locked room. Day after day, month after month, until eventually, the soul becomes tired of carrying emotions openly. That is when people become emotionally unavailable. Not because they stopped feeling, because feeling became too painful. You know what emotionally damaged people fear the most? Not loneliness, false attachment. The kind where someone makes you feel important temporarily, then disappears emotionally once they no longer need you. That experience destroys trust deeply, especially for loyal people. Because loyal people attach sincerely. They mean what they say. They stay longer than they should. And unfortunately, those are usually the people who suffer the most silently. After enough disappointment, a strange transformation begins happening inside a person. They become calmer externally, while internally becoming emotionally exhausted beyond words. The laughter becomes quieter, the excitement fades, the energy changes. Not dramatically, slowly, like a light dimming little by little. And one day, they stop expecting deep understanding from anyone entirely. Not in anger, not in hatred, in acceptance. They finally understand most people are fighting their own battles too. Most people are emotionally distracted, emotionally inconsistent, emotionally temporary. So the heart adapts by depending on itself more, protecting itself more carefully. That independence looks cold from the outside, but internally, it was built from survival. Because emotionally exhausted people eventually realize something important. Peace is rare. Real loyalty is rare. Consistency is rare. And once they understand that, they stop giving unlimited access to their heart. No more over-explaining. No more begging people to stay. No more destroying themselves trying to save unstable connections. Instead, they become quieter observers of life, watching people carefully, protecting their energy carefully, protecting their mental stability carefully, because they remember exactly how painful it felt when nobody protected them emotionally. And maybe that is the saddest transformation of all. A once soft soul learning how to survive by becoming emotionally guarded. Not evil, not cruel, just tired of bleeding invisibly. Invisible pain is dangerous because eventually people become so used to hiding it they forget how to ask for help correctly. They laugh while exhausted, smile while mentally collapsing, comfort others while secretly needing comfort themselves. And after enough years of doing that, the soul becomes confused. Confused about whether anybody truly cares or only cares about the version of you that is useful. destroys people internally, especially the quiet ones, the thoughtful ones, the deeply emotional ones who pretend they are fine because they fear becoming a burden. Those people suffer in silence more than anyone realizes. You know what hurts them the most? Not rejection, not insults, feeling emotionally forgotten. Feeling like their existence only matters when they are giving something. Energy, attention, support, understanding. But the moment they become emotionally tired, everybody suddenly becomes distant too. That kind of loneliness changes the nervous system. It teaches a person to stop depending emotionally on anyone completely. Not because isolation feels good, because disappointment became too familiar. After enough emotional pain, people stop expressing sadness normally. They hide it inside humor, inside silence, inside disappearing randomly from everyone. Because explaining emotional exhaustion to people who never experienced it feels impossible. So they carry it alone instead, night after night, thought after thought. And honestly, that internal battle is exhausting beyond words. The overthinking, the emotional memories, the constant replaying of painful moments while trying to act normal publicly. It drains the soul slowly. Funny thing is, most emotionally damaged people still remain kind, still respectful, still careful with other people's feelings, even after life was careless with theirs. That is real strength. Not loudness, not aggression. The ability to stay gentle without letting the world destroy your humanity completely. But even strong souls become tired eventually. Tired of carrying invisible sadness. Tired of pretending healing is easy. Tired of surviving emotionally while everyone assumes they are okay. And after enough suffering, they stop searching for people to save them. They start saving themselves quietly instead.